All right, Genesis chapter 48 is where we will be this morning. Genesis chapter 48. We looked at chapter 49 and the promises that were given to the 12 sons. When we talked about Joseph, we used some of the verses from Genesis chapter 48 that describe Joseph becoming two tribes through his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We want to talk about them this morning. We discussed the story, but didn't really go into much detail about the promise that was given by Jacob to those two. So we covered the 12 sons specifically in chapter 49, but let's go back to Genesis 48 and we'll discuss the two sons of Joseph this morning. Genesis 48 verse 1, it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, "Behold, thy father is sick," and he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, "Behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee." And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. And Jacob said unto Joseph, "God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of born in the land of Egypt, before I came into thee in Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine." So we've read these verses. The two sons of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, they were to be Jacob's like sons. So just like Reuben was a son, he became a tribe. Just like Simeon was a son, he became a tribe. Ephraim and Manasseh are not sons of Jacob, but they will become the tribes of Israel. Joseph becomes those two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. Let's talk about these two sons. As we've done with the others, let's go back to the earlier story that deals with their birth. In Genesis chapter 41, we have the story of the birth here of the sons of Joseph. Genesis chapter 41. Verse 45, Genesis 41, verse 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paaneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. He gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. During the 7 years of plenty, 2 sons were born to him. The first one is named Manasseh. The name Manasseh means forgetting, or to forget. He mentions there in verse 51 that God hath made him to forget all of his toil and his father's house. When Joseph was able to look at this little boy, the blessing was enough to make him forget the toil that he had been through. Now, he's been through a lot, right? As we've covered the life of Joseph and you've studied it, you understand all that Joseph has been through in his life, being sold into slavery, being falsely accused, stints in prison. But then he looks down at this child that God has given him. And he sees those little fingers and he sees those little toes. And there's a sense in which he's able to forget. In other words, he's able to put that behind him. He's actually able to see in the blessing that laid in front of him and the child that God had given him an ability to recover and get past his own past and to forget those things. That's encouraging, right? You know, sometimes we struggle with this, and you'll find folks that aren't able to get over their past. They're not able to get over the toil. They're not able to get past, the troubles or the slidings or things that have happened to them over the years. We certainly are encouraged to know that God in giving us blessings, and God in working through us and working with us, that there are a multitude of blessings that we have. We have bright spots in life. It's not all valleys. There are mountaintops. There are plateaus. There are blessings that we enjoy in this world. And man, sometimes you might find folks that all they dwell upon is the negative. All they ever dwell upon is, something in the past that went wrong or troubles that they've had. Joseph is able to come to realize that, and we read about it here in this passage as it leads up to the birth of Manasseh, the 7 years of plenty give enough for the 7 years of famine. The blessings, if we have the proper perspective on it, the blessings can and do outweigh the disappointments. Think of all the blessings that we enjoy each day. Sometimes we think of simple things or little things or what we call little things, right? We've got, life, health, family, those things, and we just get accustomed to those things, or we might call those things little, and so we don't count those things, but we sure count the little disappointments. And so if you count the little disappointments, count the little blessings, and see if one doesn't outweigh the other. Forgetting. Being able to forget. Now look at verse 52. Verse 52, it says, "In the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." A second son named Ephraim. Now, the word Ephroth means fruitful. That's what he mentions there, that God has caused him to be fruitful. Now, while the word Ephroth means fruitful, Ephraim is a dual or multiple way of using that word. In fact, he considers himself doubly blessed or doubly fruitful now that he has this second son. You'll remember when Jacob gave his blessings to Joseph in the next chapter that he speaks of him being over the wall fruitful. And it's a play on the same kind of language there. The name Ephraim means fruitful. Double fruit. And you have Manasseh, you have Ephraim. If you really want to know what double fruit is all about, you do have to learn to forget. You got to be able to put the past behind. You do have to realize God's blessings despite the turmoil, despite the toil and the affliction of the past. So those are the sons that he has. And he's a young man. He's 30 years old when he comes to prominence, when he stands before Pharaoh. And Joseph rescues the land of Egypt. We know that. During the 7 years of plenty, he is in control. He makes sure that food is saved. He makes sure that stuff is stocked up and ready to go for the 7 years of famine. And God blesses him during that time with two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now in Genesis chapter 48, as Jacob is getting ready to die, he asks that Joseph bring his sons to him. And they are mine. They are going to be like my sons, like Reuben and Simeon, and they are going to become tribes for the nation of Israel, for the family of Israel, as they still were at this point. In Genesis chapter 48, you see the blessing that is given to them. Genesis 48, verse 13. 48, verse 13. Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. So he was going to bring Manasseh, who was the oldest, he was going to bring him to Jacob's right hand, and Ephraim to his left hand. That seems natural, right? Manasseh's the older son. Bring him to his right hand. Now it says in verse 14 that Israel stretched out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. So when he actually goes to bless them, he actually crosses his hands. He puts his right hand on the head of Ephraim. He puts his left hand on the head of Manasseh. And he does this intentionally. This was done on purpose. And Joseph was displeased at the first. It says here in verse 17 that when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head." And his father refused and said, "I know it, my son, I know it." Jacob knew this. He had done this on purpose, because verse number 19 says, "He shall become a people, and he shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations." Jacob had done this on purpose, because he saw and understood that Ephraim would become greater than Manasseh, and gives him such a blessing here in this passage. I wonder what struck Jacob in his mind here, right? Because if you're not, are you reminded of what happened with Jacob many years before? Jacob had an older brother, Esau, right? And God had made a promise with Isaac and Rebekah. Do you remember the promise that Isaac and Rebekah were given? That the elder would serve the younger. Isaac and Rebekah knew that Jacob would ultimately be greater than Esau. Now, when it comes down toward the end, and Jacob wants to receive that blessing, physically, he tries to achieve it through trickery, right? Through deception. Rebekah dresses Jacob up, puts the wool on him, makes him feel like a man of the field, and he comes in deceptively to get that blessing. I wonder if Jacob realized here, this kind of stuff doesn't have to be done deceptively. If it is God's purpose, if it is God's will, you don't have to achieve it by deceptive means. He did so wittingly, the Bible says. Right there, in front of everyone, in front of the family, in front of Joseph, he takes his hands. No deception involved. He just crosses his arms and he puts his right hand on Ephraim's head, puts his left hand on Manasseh's. And though Joseph's like, whoa, no, that's not right. Dad, he's the oldest. I know it. I didn't make a mistake. I realize what I'm doing. Ephraim, the younger son, he's going to be greater. He is going to be great. Now, they're both going to become great. They're both going to become a wealth and a multitude of people. But Ephraim would become greater than Manasseh. Now, that is the promise that is given to him. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 33, we've read verses here during this study because Moses, in some of his last blessings on the tribes, reiterates in similar language some of the promises Jacob had given. But notice here in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 17, Deuteronomy 33:17, his glory is like the firstling of the bullock, his horns are like the horns of unicorns. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the tens thousands of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. Even by that point, as the populations of each tribe had begun to grow, Ephraim had begun to overwhelm and become much larger and much greater than his brother, than the tribe of Manasseh. Now, obviously, you can read through the genealogies, you can read through the names, you can read through the book of Numbers. There's a reason it's called Numbers. There's a lot of them. And you'll notice that Ephraim just continues to grow and grow as a tribe, even though Ephraim's a generation behind, right? He's a grandson of Jacob as opposed to a son, and yet he still, with rapid growth, becomes a great, great tribe. Now, Ephraim's greatness is seen in the Bible in a couple of different ways. Number one, Ephraim has just about the greatest leader that the Old Testament shows us. If you were to think about great leaders of the people, especially during their time as a young nation, who do you think of? You think of Joshua. Joshua was a great leader from the tribe of Ephraim. It tells us so in the book of Numbers chapter 13. When they go to select men to go out and spy the land of Canaan, they've come there to Kadesh Barnea. In Numbers chapter 13 and verse number 8, Numbers 13 verse 8, it says of the tribe of Ephraim, Oshea, or Joshua, the son of Nun. If it weren't for Moses, you think of David, you think of, but if you just want to talk about a real military, political, if you would, leader, faithful, godly, dedicated, Joshua is right up there. Joshua is a faithful, capable leader for the children of Israel. You could do several weeks. We've done that before. You go through the book of Joshua. You look at his exploits. You look at the great things that he has done. But the Bible tells us, if you'll turn to Numbers chapter 27, I can tell you what I think about Joshua. I like Joshua. I like the stories about Joshua. I like his faithfulness. I like his dedication. I like his optimism when the rest of the children of Israel, or 10 of the 12 tribes, said, no, we can't do this. Joshua's like, no, they be grasshoppers to us. We got this. Or when they said, we'll be grasshoppers to them, he said, no, we've got this. We can do this with the Lord on our side. He's just a great leader. I could tell you a lot of things about Joshua, but let's read what God says about Joshua. Numbers chapter 27, verse 15. Numbers 27, verse 15. Verse 15 says, Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which shall go out before them, and which may go in before them, and which may lead them out, and which may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. Lord, they're going to need a leader. Once Moses is gone, once I'm gone, Lord, they're going to need a leader. Verse 18, and the Lord said unto Moses, take thee Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of Urim and before the Lord. At his word shall they go out, and at his word shall they come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. Joshua was the man that God chose to lead Israel once Moses was gone. Lord, they're going to need someone. And Moses could look around and see what nations looked like when there was no leader. Israel had great leaders. Moses, and that transfers to Joshua. Do you remember what the Bible says happens after Joshua dies? Once Joshua dies and you get into the book of Judges, you see where no one individual is actually able to stand up and lead the children of Israel. Now, there are pockets of places where an individual would rise up and deliver a tribe or deliver a region or deliver some of the children of Israel. But by and large, there wasn't one national leader. We talked about when you go through the book of Judges, you're not to interpret that when it talks about a judge, that they were nationwide a judge. They were often over a tribe or over a particular pocket of people. Once Joshua dies and no leader stands up, the Bible compares that scene to, it talks about one where there was no king in Israel, and everyone does that which is right in their own eyes. Once Joshua dies, Israel is left in a real quandary, and they go through a very, very struggle bus period, right? You get a great leader like Moses, you get a great leader like Joshua, and then you get this gap where it's a free-for-all. And there's this huge roller coaster of ups and downs throughout different tribes in the land of Israel. And then ultimately, they decide we need a king, right? We have got to have a king. Now, the one they picked was Saul, and that didn't really settle the roller coaster. But God selects David, and that brings what? That brings that kind of calming presence, good king. You actually get a series of pretty good kings after David. David, Solomon, Asa, Jehoshaphat, different kings. Joshua was a great, great leader. He was the one that God picked. He was the one that God had selected. When Moses said, we need somebody, we're going to need somebody to lead, you take Joshua. Joshua is a man in whom the Spirit is. Now, Joshua does not come on the scene in Numbers chapter 27. Joshua does not come on the scene in Joshua chapter 1 after Moses dies and is just quickly elevated to a position. He doesn't jump to the front of the line. Joshua is a man that has proven and shown himself faithful for a very, very long time. We could read the story from Exodus chapter 17, where it was Joshua who fought with Amalek. Remember the story of Moses on the mountain, and when his hands are raised, they win, and when his hands lower, they start to lose. And so Aaron and Hur come and they steady Moses and hold his hands up. Remember who the Bible says is the one that's actually out in the field fighting the battles? It was Joshua. It was Joshua in Exodus chapter 24 that was Moses' servant and minister when he went up on the mountain to get God's law, to get God's commandments. It was Joshua in Exodus chapter 33 that stayed with the congregation, that stayed there in the tabernacle of the congregation in Moses' stead. It was Joshua in Numbers chapter 11 that stayed by Moses' side. It was Joshua in Numbers chapter 13 and 14 that said, no, we can take this land when everyone doubted. Joshua has been faithful this entire time. Now that's what it requires. That's really what it takes to be someone that should be qualified for leadership. That's something that each believer really needs to develop, are consistent habits of faithfulness. Joshua's not a flash in the pan. He doesn't just come out of nowhere. He's not just a one-hit wonder, right? He comes along from the beginning and he just proves himself dedicated, faithful, and works hard. He's a servant to Moses. He realizes his position and he serves. And he faithfully serves at the bidding of Moses, doing the work of the Lord and whatever work was necessary to get the children of Israel from Egypt to the land of promise. And then you get to the book of Joshua and you get to read about all of his exploits. Like once he is crowned isn't the right word because he wasn't a king, but once he's made leader of the children of Israel, he doesn't stop, right? Sometimes folks, when they get, they'll work hard. They're given, maybe some authority or a high position, and that's what they were shooting for, so they just kind of quit after that, and they give up or they stop. Joshua doesn't do that. Joshua leads the children of Israel into these wars, into the occupation of the land, and delivers the land into their hand. Remember what Joshua said when he gets toward the end of his life, when you get toward the end of the book of Joshua? Still, at the very end, you choose who you'll serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so he was faithful, not just at the beginning, not just to achieve a position, but he was faithful from beginning to end. Joshua is one of the great, I consider him probably among the top 3 or 4 leaders of the children of Israel. Honestly, if you count Moses, David, and Joshua. I think those are about, those would be my picks, for the great leaders of the nation of Israel. Let's work at that, right? Let's work on developing consistent habits of faithfulness. The hit and miss stuff, not being reliable, hit and miss faithfulness, that's probably good enough to keep you, keep you on a church roll and keep you out of trouble. But if you really want to be a tool, if you really want to be somebody that can be used in good service to the Lord, let's learn to develop consistent faithfulness. Not one-offs, not here and there, but just regular. Like Joshua, you get to these, numbers, and Moses, we need a man, Lord, that's going to be able to lead. Here's one. Here's one that has the Spirit in him, one who has shown and proven himself faithful. When they lost Joshua, the downward spiral in the book of Judges is not an accident. Okay, when Joshua dies, it took Israel a long time to recover. There was no natural transition like there was from Moses to Joshua. There was no transition, and they felt it. And that book of Judges, I've jokingly called it, might be the worst book in the Bible. It's terrible. It's terrible, some of the things that they go through against their enemies, against each other. It's rough. So don't undersell or understate Joshua's influence. Ephraim does indeed become a much greater tribe than the tribe of Manasseh. Now Ephraim would also be known for their jealousy. Their jealousy. Let's turn to Judges chapter 7. You guys remember the story of Gideon, right? Gideon goes out to fight the Midianites. And in Judges chapter 7, we've got a little episode here. Let's read verse 23. Judges chapter 7, verse 23. The men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali, out of Asher, and out of all Manasseh, and pursued after the Midianites. Now notice the tribes there that are mentioned. Now read verse 24. And Gideon sent messengers throughout all Mount Ephraim, saying, Come down against the Midianites, and take before them the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. Then all the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and took the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. They took two princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeeb, and they slew Oreb upon the rock Oreb, and Zeeb they slew at the winepress of Zeeb, and pursued Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon on the other side of Jordan. So during this battle with the Midianites, we got all these tribes that have gathered together, and you get down toward the end of the battle, and you get through the heat and the hotness of the battle, and Gideon says, send messengers throughout Ephraim. You get some more help. And they say they go to Ephraim, and they get reinforcements, and they get some that help win this great battle. But I want to look at verse number 1 of chapter 8, because when this is over, Judges chapter 8, verse number 1, And the men of Ephraim said unto him, Why hast thou served us thus, that thou callest us not, when thou wentest to fight with the Midianites? And they did chide with him sharply. Ephraim, they were upset that what? That Gideon hadn't called them earlier. Like, why'd you wait so long? Why didn't you call us? We could have come to help. Why did you wait till the very, like, they're mad, right? They're like really upset that Gideon had not called for them to help earlier. In Judges chapter 12, turn over there real quick. Judges chapter 12. Jephthah has just won a great battle against the Ammonites. Okay, different group of people. Jephthah has fought the Ammonites. And notice this here, Judges chapter 12 and verse number 1. It says, And the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward and said unto Jephthah, Wherefore passest thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and did not call us to go with thee? We will burn thine house down upon thee with fire. Now, with greatness often comes ego. And some of the descendants of Ephraim later on in generations, they got a little jealous. They got a little ego about them. And when Gideon didn't call them until the very end, they took offense at that. Why did you wait till the very end? Why are you treating us this way? Now, from chapter 7, Gideon was actually able to kind of smooth that over. He stoked their ego a little bit. Hey, you did a great job with Oreb and Zeeb. Be happy, be content and thankful there. And he smooths that situation over. This situation doesn't get smoothed over because it's a little intense. You didn't call us to come and help you. How about we burn your house down? So in verse 2, Jephthah said unto them, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon. And when I called you, ye delivered me not out of their hands. And when I saw that ye delivered me not, I put my life in my hands and passed over against the children of Ammon. And the Lord delivered them into my hand. Wherefore then are ye come up unto me this day to fight against me? There's some kind of misunderstanding here because they say you didn't call. And Jephthah says, no, I called and you didn't answer. And there's some kind of miscommunication here. Now, it's one thing to have a miscommunication and work through it. It's another thing to have a misunderstanding and threaten to burn people's houses down because you felt slighted or you felt cheated or you felt left out. So verse number 4, Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. Sometimes a Gideon will play diplomat and smooth things over. Sometimes you get a Jephthah and you threaten him and he'll go to war with you. And that's what happens here in verse number 4. Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. The men of Gilead smote Ephraim because they said, ye Gileadites are fugitive from Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. And the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites. It was so that when those Ephraimites were escaped, said, let me go over, that the men of Gilead said unto them, art thou an Ephraimite? And he said, nay. Of course, they were going to betray themselves because it says in verse 6, they said unto him, say now Shibboleth, and he said Sibboleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. Then they took him and slew him at the passages of Jordan, and there fell that time of the Ephraimites 42,000. Greatness comes with its risks, right? Sometimes with greatness, you get an ego. And with an ego, they bit off a little more than they could chew. Talked back to Gideon, he smoothed it over. Talked back to Jephthah, no, he was ready to fight. And 42,000, it says, died there. So, I get it, everyone wants to be great. And Ephraim desired credit, and they wanted to participate. If your pursuit of greatness sends you to this end, be cautious. Before a man can be great, before a man can rule, the first one he needs to rule over, or learn to rule over, is himself, right? And the Bible tells us that. Proverbs tells us much about that, about the man that, can't control his own spirit, can't control his own self. Be cautious with that. With greatness comes, high risk, high reward. And some of the descendants of the Ephraimites got an ego, wanted to always be included, wanted their name to be considered, and this time it bit them, and they got in some serious, serious trouble. Well, I'm going to have to quit there because we're out of time. I'll try to pick up with a little bit more of this next time because there's still a little bit more to talk about with the tribe of Ephraim. Let's pray. God, we're thankful to come today or this morning and